this morning up until this point, where he's at in his career, trade him. Get what you can for him. It'll be a lot. Is it going to be 3 firsts? No. Is it going to be 2? Maybe, but you're at least going to get 1, you're going to get a 2, and you're going to get whatever else. But I just don't understand this idea of like, what are you trying to accomplish here? And it goes back to the Russell Wilson conversation. Are you really just trying to win 8 or 9 games and scrape into the playoffs so you can lose in the first?
Gabriel will become the first quarterback to make his initial NFL start in one of the international games. Jason Lloyd with his thoughts on Dylan Gabriel.
I actually think Dylan is going to be competent. I don't think he's going to be a star. I don't think he's not throwing for 300 yards or anything like that. But I do think he's going to.
Goes back to the Russell Wilson conversation. Are you really just trying to win 8 or 9 games and scrape into the playoffs so you can lose in the first round? Okay, I guess you can do that, but I don't know how that's furthering this franchise into a healthier spot. It's not.
What would you say if someone told you to get rid of the most dominant defensive player in football right after his best season ever? You'd probably laugh. You'd think it was a joke. But that's exactly what's happening in Cleveland right now, and the person saying it isn't some random fan on social media. It's a prominent sports journalist with a platform and an audience. Myles Garrett just finished a season for the ages. He led the entire NFL in sacks. He recorded 7 quarterback takedowns in a single game, a performance so rare it instantly became legendary. Every stat, every metric, every eye test confirmed he was operating at a level few defenders have ever reached. And yet, almost immediately after, a well-known voice in Cleveland sports media stepped forward and said the Browns should trade him. The take was so outrageous that fans couldn't believe what they were hearing. But here's what makes this story so much deeper than just one bad opinion. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was part of a pattern, one that fans have been noticing for months. And the questions people are starting to ask go far beyond just football analysis. There's something deeply unsettling happening in Cleveland sports media right now, and it's time someone connected all the pieces. This isn't just about one controversial take or one journalist looking for attention. This is about a pattern that's becoming impossible to ignore, a series of comments and opinions that have left fans scratching their heads and asking some very uncomfortable questions. At the center of this controversy is Jason Lloyd, a name that most Cleveland sports fans know well. Lloyd has been covering the Browns for years, building a reputation as someone who isn't afraid to share his opinions, even when those opinions go against the grain. But recently, his takes have crossed from controversial into territory that many are finding deeply troubling. The latest target of Lloyd's criticism is none other than Myles Garrett, the defensive superstar who has been the backbone of the Browns' defense since he was drafted. Garrett isn't just a good player. He's a generational talent, the kind of defender who comes along once in a decade, maybe less. He's been the one constant bright spot on a team that has struggled to find its identity, the one player opposing offenses have to game plan around every single week. And yet, despite all of that, despite a season that saw Garrett reach heights few defenders ever reach, Lloyd has called for the Browns to trade him. Not just suggested it might be worth considering, actually called for it, loudly, repeatedly, with arguments that fall apart under even the slightest scrutiny. But what makes this situation so much more complicated than just one bad take is the context surrounding it. Lloyd hasn't just gone after Garrett. He's been vocal in his criticism of other players too, and when you start looking at who gets praised and who gets criticized, a pattern emerges that's hard to explain away. Before the Garrett controversy exploded, Lloyd was making waves with his comments about Shedeur Sanders, the talented quarterback prospect who has been generating buzz across the league. Lloyd's position was clear and consistent. He didn't want Sanders anywhere near the Browns' roster. His criticism was pointed, persistent, and struck many as excessive given Sanders' obvious talent. Then there's Dylan Gabriel, another quarterback prospect who Lloyd has discussed in very different terms. When talking about Gabriel, Lloyd's tone shifts completely. Suddenly, there's praise, there's optimism, there's talk about what a great fit Gabriel could be for the team's future. The contrast is so stark that fans started connecting dots. Myles Garrett is one of the best defensive players in football. Shedeur Sanders is a highly touted quarterback prospect. Both are black athletes. Dylan Gabriel, the player Lloyd can't stop praising, is not. Now, this alone wouldn't mean much. Journalists have different opinions about different players all the time. But when the pattern is this consistent, when the praise and criticism seem to align along certain lines, people are going to start asking questions. This video isn't about making definitive accusations. Intent is nearly impossible to prove. What goes on inside someone's head, what truly motivates their opinions, that's something only they can know for cert. But what we can do is examine the pattern. We can look at the consistency of who gets elevated and who gets torn down. We can ask why certain players receive endless criticism while others get endless praise. And we can point out when those patterns raise concerns that deserve to be discussed. The Cleveland Browns fan base is fired up about this. They've watched Myles Garrett dominate for years. They've seen him represent the organization with class and dignity. They've witnessed him put together performances that belong in the record books. And they're not going to sit quietly while a journalist pushes narratives that seem disconnected from reality. Over the course of this video, we're going to break down exactly what happened. We'll look at Lloyd's comments about Garrett, his reasoning for the trade proposal, and the statistical reality that makes those comments look absurd. We'll examine the pattern of his coverage, the players he criticizes versus the players he praises. We'll explore the questions fans are asking and the concerns that are being raised. And we'll talk about what this says about sports media more broadly, about the hot take economy, about accountability, and about the responsibility journalists have to the athletes they cover. Myles Garrett deserved a different narrative after this season. He deserved to be celebrated, recognized, and praised for what he accomplished on the field. Instead, he became the target of takes that have raised more questions about the journalist than the player. That's not just bad sports coverage. That's a failure of everything sports journalism should be about. The conversation is happening whether sports media acknowledges it or not. Fans are paying attention. They're connecting the dots. And they're demanding answers. So let's dive in and examine everything that's unfolded, because this story is far from over. It started with a take so outrageous that fans had to listen twice to make sure they heard it correctly. Jason Lloyd, speaking with the confidence of someone who believed he was making a reasonable point, laid out his position clearly. Trade Myles Garrett. Get what you can for him. Use those draft picks to find better players at his position and others. That was the argument. That was the proposal. And the timing couldn't have been more baffling. This wasn't coming after a down year. This wasn't following a string of injuries or a decline in performance. This was immediately after Myles Garrett had finished the most dominant season of his career. A season where he led the entire NFL in sacks. A season where he recorded 7 sacks in a single game. A season where every measurable stat confirmed what everyone watching already knew, that Garrett was playing at a level few defenders in NFL history have ever reached. Lloyd's reasoning was that the Browns could use the draft capital from a Garrett trade to rebuild and find players who could help the team more. Better players, he suggested, than the one who just dominated the league. It's the kind of logic that falls apart the moment you apply any scrutiny. You're going to trade the best pass rusher in football for draft picks that might turn into players half as good. That's not a strategy. That's organizational malpractice. But Lloyd doubled down, and that's when things got even more concerning. He didn't just suggest trading Garrett. He questioned whether Garrett could even be trusted in big moments. He actually claimed that if the Browns made the playoffs, Myles Garrett might fail them when it mattered most. He called into question whether Garrett was a big game player. Let that sink in. A journalist looked at one of the most dominant defenders in football, a player who shows up and performs at an elite level week after week, and suggested he can't be trusted when the stakes are high. There's no evidence to support this claim. There's no pattern of Garrett disappearing in important games. This wasn't analysis. This was narrative creation, and a destructive one at that. The reaction from Browns fans was immediate and intense. Social media exploded with people questioning Lloyd's judgment, his motivations, and his credibility. How could anyone watch what Garrett did this season and conclude that trading him was the right move? How could anyone look at his consistency, his dominance, his impact on every game he plays, and question his ability to show up in big moments? Lloyd compared the situation to Russell Wilson, suggesting that keeping Garrett would just lead to the Browns scraping into the playoffs and losing in the first round. But that comparison makes no sense. Wilson's situation involved quarterback play, offensive struggles, and contract complications. Garrett is a defensive player performing at the peak of his powers. The two scenarios have almost nothing in common. What Lloyd seemed to be suggesting was that the Browns should tank, that they should get rid of their best player in hopes of accumulating assets that might help them in the future. But that's not how successful franchises operate. You don't trade generational talents in their prime. You build around them. You surround them with pieces that complement their abilities. You do everything in your power to maximize their window of excellence. The Browns have had Myles Garrett for years. They've had one of the best defensive players in football anchoring their defense. And in all that time, the failures of the organization have never been on Garrett's shoulders. He's done his job. He's exceeded expectations. He's been the one player opposing teams have to account for on every single snap. If the Browns haven't succeeded, it's because of issues elsewhere, not because of anything Garrett has or hasn't done. Lloyd's take exposed something that goes beyond just bad analysis. It revealed a willingness to tear down a player who has done everything right. A player who has been a model citizen, a leader, a dominant force on the field. There's no football reason to trade Myles Garrett. There's no logical argument that holds up. So what's actually driving this position? That's the question fans started asking. And as they dug deeper, as they looked at Lloyd's other comments and coverage, a pattern started to emerge that made the Garrett take look like part of something larger, something more troubling. Something that couldn't be explained away as just one journalist having a bad opinion. The take that ignited everything wasn't just controversial for the sake of controversy. It was a window into something deeper, a glimpse at a pattern of coverage that has left many questioning what's really going on behind the scenes. And the more people looked, the more concerning the picture became. To understand just how absurd the trade proposal is, you need to understand exactly what Myles Garrett accomplished this season. Because the numbers don't just tell a story of excellence. They tell a story of historic dominance, the kind of performance that gets talked about for generations. Let's start with the headline number. Myles Garrett led the entire NFL in sacks this season. In a league filled with incredible pass rushers, players specifically paid millions of dollars to get to the quarterback, Garrett stood above them all. He wasn't just good. He wasn't just great. He was the best defensive player in the world at what he does. That's not hyperbole. That's what the numbers show. But the single stat that makes your jaw drop, the one that people will be talking about for years, is the 7-sack game. 7 quarterback takedowns in a single contest. To truly appreciate how incredible that is, you need some context. Recording 3 sacks in a game is considered an exceptional performance. Most elite pass rushers are thrilled with 2 sacks. Some of the greatest defenders in NFL history went entire careers without putting up a 7-sack game. Garrett did it in one afternoon and made it look almost routine. The consistency throughout the season was equally remarkable. Garrett recorded at least 1 sack in 12 of the Browns' 17 games. Week after week, regardless of the opponent, regardless of the game plan designed specifically to stop him, Garrett found a way to get to the quarterback. That level of sustained excellence is what separates the very good from the truly legendary. His pressure rate was off the charts all season long. Opposing quarterbacks had to account for him on every single snap. Offensive coordinators spent entire weeks scheming ways to slow him down. They would chip him with running backs, double-team him with guards and tackles, roll the quarterback away from his side of the field. And even with all that extra attention, Garrett still dominated. He forced rushed throws, disrupted timing, and made life miserable for every offense he faced. What some casual fans might not realize is that Garrett's impact goes far beyond just the sack numbers. His run defense this season was equally impressive. He set the edge with discipline, fought through blocks, made plays in the backfield, and proved that he's a complete defensive player. There's no way to hide from Myles Garrett. Whether you're throwing the ball or running it, he's going to impact the play. Pro Football Focus, one of the most respected analytics sites in football, ranked Garrett as the top edge defender in the entire league. And it wasn't close. His grades were elite across every category they measure. Pass rush productivity, run defense, overall impact. Garrett dominated them all. When the experts who study every snap of every game grade their work, Myles Garrett comes out on top. These aren't just good stats. These are MVP-caliber numbers from a defensive player. In a league where the MVP award almost always goes to quarterbacks, Garrett's season was so dominant that it sparked legitimate conversations about whether a defender should win the award. That's how good he was. That's how historic his performance was. The Browns were a mess this season. There's no way around that reality. Kevin Stefanski was fired. The offense couldn't find its footing. There were injuries, controversies, and moments where the entire organization seemed to be falling apart at the seams. Through all of that chaos, Myles Garrett was the one constant, the one player who showed up every week and performed at the highest level, the one bright spot in an otherwise dark season. When the dust settles and people look back at this era of Browns football, Garrett will be remembered as the player who kept things together, the player who gave fans something to cheer about even when everything else was going wrong, the player who proved that individual excellence can shine through even on a struggling team. And this is the player Jason Lloyd wants to trade. This is the performance Lloyd looked at and concluded wasn't good enough. This is the season that somehow led to questions about whether Garrett could be trusted in big games. It defies all logic. It contradicts everything the numbers show. It's a take so disconnected from reality that you have to start looking for explanations beyond just bad analysis. Myles Garrett put together a season that should have silenced any critics. A season that should have cemented his status as one of the greatest defenders of his generation. A season that any franchise in football would build around without a second thought. Instead, he became the target of takes that raised more questions about the person making them than the player being discussed. The stats speak for themselves. The film speaks for itself. And anyone who watched Myles Garrett this season knows exactly what the Cleveland Browns have. A generational talent in his prime, performing at the highest level, and worth every bit of the investment the organization has made in him. If the Garrett take existed in isolation, maybe it could be written off as one journalist having an unusually bad opinion. But that's not the case. When fans started looking at Jason Lloyd's other commentary, at his history of takes and who he's targeted with criticism, a concerning pattern began to emerge. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee. Before the Garrett controversy exploded, Lloyd had been making waves with his commentary about Shedeur Sanders. Sanders is one of the most talked about quarterback prospects in recent memory. He's got the arm talent, the pedigree, and the swagger that teams look for in franchise quarterbacks. He's the son of NFL legend Dylan Sanders and has performed at a high level throughout his college career. Many analysts see him as a potential first-round pick who could step in and contribute immediately. But Lloyd's position on Sanders was clear and consistent. He didn't think Sanders should be on the Browns roster. His criticism was pointed, persistent, and struck many observers as excessive given Sanders' obvious talent and potential. Now, reasonable people can disagree about any quarterback prospect. Evaluating that position is one of the most difficult things to do in football. But the tone and intensity of Lloyd's criticism raised eyebrows. Then there's Dylan Gabriel, another quarterback prospect who Lloyd has discussed in very different terms. When talking about Gabriel, Lloyd's entire demeanor seems to shift. Suddenly, there's praise. There's optimism. There's excitement about what Gabriel could bring to the franchise. Lloyd has talked about what a great fit Gabriel would be for the Browns, praised his abilities, and expressed confidence in his future with the team. The contrast couldn't be more stark. Two quarterback prospects, both talented in their own ways, but receiving completely different treatment from the same journalist. One gets relentless criticism and suggestions that he doesn't belong. The other gets glowing praise and optimism about his potential. Fans noticed. They started asking why. And when you add Myles Garrett to the picture, the pattern becomes even more pronounced. Here's a player who just had a historic season, who has been the backbone of the Browns' defense for years, who has represented the organization with class and excellence. And Lloyd wants him gone. Lloyd questions whether he can be trusted in big moments. Lloyd suggests trading him for draft picks that might turn into players half as good. So let's lay this out clearly. Shedeur Sanders, black quarterback prospect, gets consistent criticism from Lloyd. Myles Garrett, black defensive superstar, gets trade proposals and questions about his reliability. Dylan Gabriel, white quarterback prospect, gets praise and optimism. The pattern is right there. And once people started connecting the dots, the conversation shifted from just bad takes to something potentially much more troubling. Now, it's important to be careful and fair here. We can't see inside Jason Lloyd's head. We don't know what truly motivates his opinions. Intent is incredibly difficult to prove, and accusing someone of racial bias is a serious charge that shouldn't be made lightly. This isn't about making definitive accusations that can't be substantiated, but here's what we can say. The pattern exists. It's observable. It's consistent. and it raises questions that deserve to be asked. When a journalist's harshest criticism consistently lands on black athletes while his praise consistently goes to white athletes, people are going to notice. They're going to ask questions, and those questions are legitimate. This isn't something unique to Jason Lloyd or to Cleveland sports media. The sports world has a long and well-documented history of treating athletes differently based on race. Black athletes often face harsher criticism, more scrutiny, and less celebration of their achievements compared to their white counterparts. Studies have shown this. Decades of documented examples support it. The lived experiences of countless athletes confirm it. So when fans see a pattern like the one Lloyd is exhibiting, they're not making baseless accusations out of nowhere. They're recognizing something that has historical precedent. They're applying a lens that has been proven relevant in sports media over and over again. And they're asking whether what they're seeing fits a troubling mold. The conversation has moved beyond just being about football analysis. It's about fairness. It's about how athletes are treated. It's about whether the coverage they receive is based on their performance or on something else entirely. And in the case of Jason Lloyd's commentary, the evidence suggests that something beyond just talent evaluation is at play. Fans are demanding answers. They want to know why Myles Garrett, after a historic season, is being targeted for trade proposals. They want to know why Shedeur Sanders gets criticized while Dylan Gabriel gets praised. They want to understand what's driving these takes that seem to defy all logic and reason. And until those answers come, the questions are going to keep getting louder. Once the pattern became visible, the questions started flowing. And these aren't questions that can be easily dismissed or explained away. They go to the heart of how sports journalism operates and what responsibilities journalists have to the athletes they cover. The first and most obvious question is simply, why? Why would anyone look at Myles Garrett's season and conclude that trading him is the right move? Why would someone question his ability to perform in big games when there's no evidence to support that claim? Why would the criticism be so persistent, so pointed, so disconnected from what's actually happening on the field? There's no good football answer to these questions. The analysis doesn't hold up. The logic doesn't make sense. Trading the best pass rusher in football after his best season would be one of the worst moves in franchise history. Anyone with even a basic understanding of how to build a football team knows this. So if the football reasoning doesn't work, what's actually driving the position? Some fans have speculated that it's simply about attention. The hot take economy in sports media rewards controversy. The more outrageous the opinion, the more people talk about it. Maybe Lloyd is just playing the game, generating engagement by saying things he knows will provoke reactions. Maybe he doesn't actually believe Garrett should be traded. Maybe he's just performing controversy for clicks. But even if that's the case, it raises its own set of concerns. Because if you're going to manufacture controversy for attention, why consistently target certain players? Why always seem to land your harshest takes on black athletes while reserving praise for white ones? Even if the motivation is pure attention-seeking, the pattern still matters. The impact on the athletes being targeted is still real. Others have asked whether there's something more troubling going on, whether the pattern of criticism reflects unconscious biases or, worse, conscious prejudices. This is where the conversation gets uncomfortable, because these are accusations that carry significant weight. Accusing someone of racial bias is serious. It's not something that should be done without careful consideration. But here's the reality. We can observe patterns without definitively assigning motives. We can notice that certain players consistently receive harsh criticism while others receive praise. We can point out when those patterns align with racial lines. We can ask questions without making final judgments. And we can demand that journalists examine their own coverage and be honest about what's driving it. The sports media world has a responsibility here. When one of their own exhibits patterns that raise concerns, the appropriate response isn't to circle the wagons and defend. It's to ask the hard questions internally. It's to examine whether the criticism is valid. It's to hold journalists accountable for coverage that seems unfair or biased. What makes this situation particularly frustrating is that Myles Garrett has done everything right. He's stayed out of trouble off the field. He's been a leader in the locker room. He's represented the Browns organization with class and dignity. He's performed at an elite level year after year. If there's a formula for being above criticism, Garrett has followed it to the letter. And yet, he's still being targeted. The same is true of Shedeur Sanders. Whatever you think of his NFL potential, Sanders has handled himself with maturity throughout the evaluation process. He comes from football royalty and has carried himself accordingly. He's a legitimate prospect that many teams are interested in. The criticism he's received from Lloyd seems disproportionate to any legitimate concerns about his game. Fans are tired of seeing this play out. They're tired of watching talented black athletes get torn down while others get built up. They're tired of the double standards that seem to permeate sports media. And they're using their voices to call it out in ways that weren't possible before the age of social media. The uncomfortable questions aren't going away. Whether Jason Lloyd ever addresses them directly or not, the pattern of his coverage has been noticed and documented. Every future take he makes will be viewed through this lens. Every opinion he offers will be scrutinized for evidence of the same biases. That's the consequence of exhibiting a pattern that raises these concerns. The sports media world needs more accountability. It needs journalists who are willing to examine their own biases, who are honest about what drives their coverage, and who treat all athletes fairly regardless of their background. Until that becomes the norm, situations like this one will keep happening. And fans will keep asking the uncomfortable questions that need to be asked. Myles Garrett deserved better than this. Shedeur Sanders deserved better than this. And Cleveland sports fans deserved a journalist who covers their team fairly and accurately, not one who seems driven by something other than the actual performance happening on the field. To truly understand why Lloyd's takes are so offensive to Browns fans, you have to understand what Myles Garrett means to this franchise. He's not just a good player. He's not just a star. He's the face of the organization, the one constant in years of chaos and disappointment, the player who has given fans something to believe in when everything else was falling apart. The Cleveland Browns have a complicated history. They've experienced heartbreak, frustration, and stretches of losing that tested even the most loyal fans. Through rebuilds and regime changes, through bad quarterbacks and worse draft picks, through all of it, Myles Garrett has been there, showing up, producing, giving the fans a reason to tune in even when the rest of the product was unwatchable. When Garrett was drafted first overall in 2017, there was immediate hope that he could be different, that he could be the franchise cornerstone the Browns had been searching for. And unlike so many other Cleveland draft picks who failed to live up to expectations, Garrett delivered. From his very first season, he showed flashes of the dominant player he would become. And with each passing year, he's only gotten better. Think about what that means for a fan base that has experienced so much disappointment. Finally, a draft pick who actually works out. Finally, a player who exceeds expectations instead of falling short. Finally, someone you can build around with confidence, knowing that he's going to show up and perform at an elite level. Myles Garrett gave Cleveland something it desperately needed: hope. And he's done it the right way. Garrett isn't just talented. He's professional. He prepares meticulously. He studies film. He takes care of his body. He's a leader in the locker room, someone younger players look up to and learn from. Off the field, he's represented the organization with class. He's avoided controversies. He's been the kind of face of the franchise that any team would want. Yes, there was the incident with Mason Rudolph in 2019. Garrett lost his cool in an ugly moment that resulted in a suspension. But he owned it, served his punishment, and came back better than ever. He didn't make excuses. He didn't shift blame. He acknowledged his mistake and proved through his actions that it was an aberration, not a reflection of who he is. Every player has moments they regret. What matters is how they respond. And Garrett's response has been exemplary. The relationship between Garrett and Cleveland fans is special. There's a mutual appreciation there. Fans recognize everything he's given to the franchise: the effort, the excellence, the commitment to being great. And Garrett has embraced Cleveland in return. He could have demanded a trade years ago when the team was struggling. He could have complained publicly about the losing. Instead, he put his head down and kept working, kept producing, kept being the best player on the field every single week. That's what makes Lloyd's takes so insulting. He's not just criticizing a player. He's dismissing everything Garrett has meant to this franchise. He's suggesting that the cornerstone of the Browns' defense, the one player who has consistently delivered, should be shipped off for draft picks. It's a slap in the face to everything Garrett has done for Cleveland. The Browns' front office knows what they have. There has been no indication from anyone in the organization that trading Garrett is even a consideration. He's under contract. He's in his prime. He's performing at an MVP level. You don't trade players like that. You lock them up. You build around them. You do everything in your power to maximize their window of excellence. When Myles Garrett's career is over, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. That's not a prediction. That's a near certainty based on what he's already accomplished. And when that day comes, when he stands at the podium in Canton, he'll be remembered as a Cleveland Brown. As someone who represented the franchise during a difficult era and brought excellence to a team that desperately needed it. Jason Lloyd's takes will be footnotes, examples of bad journalism that got it completely wrong. The hot takes calling for Garrett's trade will be remembered as some of the most misguided predictions in Cleveland sports media history. And Garrett's legacy will be secure, built on performance, consistency, and being exactly the kind of player any franchise would be lucky to have. That's what Myles Garrett means to Cleveland. He's not just a player. He's a symbol of what this franchise is trying to become. He's proof that good things can happen to the Browns, that draft picks can work out, that stars can embrace the city instead of looking for a way out. And anyone who suggests trading him doesn't understand the first thing about what he represents. To understand how takes like Lloyd's become possible, you need to understand the economics of modern sports media. Because while his opinions might seem absurd on their face, they exist within a system that often rewards exactly this kind of controversial content. The hot take economy is real, and it shapes coverage in ways that can be deeply problematic. Here's how it works. Sports media is driven by attention. The more eyeballs on your content, the more valuable you are. The more people talking about what you said, the more relevant you become. In this environment, being provocative often pays better than being accurate. The journalist who says something outrageous gets discussed, gets shared, gets quoted. The journalist who offers balanced, nuanced analysis often gets ignored. This creates perverse incentives. Instead of striving to be right, journalists are incentivized to be loud. Instead of offering careful analysis, they're rewarded for hot takes that generate reactions. The more people disagree with you, the more they engage with your content. And in the attention economy, engagement is the only currency that matters. Jason Lloyd's takes on Myles Garrett fit this model perfectly. Calling for the trade of the best defensive player in football after his best season is guaranteed to generate reactions. Fans will be outraged. They'll share the take with others who can't believe what they're hearing. They'll comment, argue, and create exactly the kind of engagement that drives the modern media ecosystem. From a pure attention-seeking perspective, the strategy works. Lloyd got people talking. He got his name in discussions. He got exactly the kind of engagement that helps build a media career. The problem is that this comes at a cost. The cost is accuracy. The cost is fairness. The cost is the athletes who become targets of takes designed to provoke rather than inform. And when the hot take pattern consistently targets certain athletes, when the provocative opinions always seem to land on black players while praise goes elsewhere, the damage compounds. It's not just one bad take. It's a pattern of coverage that affects how those athletes are perceived, how their accomplishments are discussed, and how their legacies are shaped. The hot take economy creates cover for all kinds of problematic behavior. A journalist can claim they're just being provocative, just generating discussion, just doing what the media landscape requires. But that doesn't excuse unfair coverage. It doesn't justify targeting certain athletes with criticism they don't deserve. And it doesn't make the pattern any less concerning. Sports media used to be different. There was a time when accuracy and insight were valued over volume and controversy. Journalists built reputations on getting things right, on having sources, on understanding the games and teams they covered better than anyone else. Being wrong publicly was embarrassing, something to be avoided. That world still exists in some corners of sports media. There are still journalists who prioritize getting it right over getting attention. But they're increasingly drowned out by the hot take artists who understand that controversy drives engagement in ways that accuracy never can. The result is a sports media landscape that often fails the athletes and fans it's supposed to serve. Athletes become targets of unfair criticism designed to generate reactions rather than illuminate truth. Fans are fed a steady diet of provocative takes that prioritize engagement over insight. And the discourse around sports becomes less about what's actually happening and more about manufactured controversies. Jason Lloyd isn't alone in playing this game. He's part of a larger ecosystem that rewards this behavior, but that doesn't excuse his individual choices. He chose to target Myles Garrett with takes that don't hold up to scrutiny. He chose to criticize Shedeur Sanders while praising Dylan Gabriel. He chose to exhibit a pattern that raised legitimate concerns. Those are his choices, and he's responsible for them. The solution isn't simple. The hot take economy exists because it works. Controversy drives engagement. Provocative opinions get shared. As long as that remains true, there will be incentives for journalists to prioritize heat over light. But fans have power too. They can choose what to engage with. They can choose to call out unfair coverage when they see it. They can choose to support journalists who prioritize accuracy and fairness. And they can choose to hold accountable those who consistently exhibit problematic patterns in their coverage. That's what's happening with Jason Lloyd right now. Fans are noticing. They're calling it out. They're refusing to let the pattern go unexamined. And in doing so, they're pushing back against a media ecosystem that has drifted too far toward controversy for its own sake. Every journalist lives and dies by their credibility. It's the foundation of everything they do. If people don't trust your analysis, don't believe your takes, don't think you're operating in good faith, then nothing else matters. You can have all the access in the world, all the platform you want, but without credibility, you're just noise. Jason Lloyd is facing a credibility crisis. His takes on Myles Garrett, combined with his pattern of coverage on other players, have caused many to question whether his opinions are worth taking seriously. And once that question gets raised, it's very difficult to put back in the bottle. The problem for Lloyd is that his reasoning doesn't hold up. Trade the best pass rusher in football after his best season? The logic makes no sense. Question whether a player who shows up and dominates every week can be trusted in big games? There's no evidence to support it. The takes aren't just wrong. They're so disconnected from reality that they raise questions about what's actually motivating them. When your professional analysis is this far removed from what's actually happening, people start looking for other explanations. Maybe you're just attention-seeking, saying whatever will generate the most engagement regardless of whether it makes sense. Maybe you have personal biases you're not acknowledging. Maybe you're pushing agendas that have nothing to do with football. Whatever the explanation, none of them reflect well on your credibility as a journalist. The pattern makes it worse. If the Garrett take existed in isolation, Lloyd could potentially weather the storm. One bad take doesn't define a career. But when the bad takes consistently target certain players, when the pattern suggests something beyond just poor analysis, the credibility damage compounds. Each new take gets viewed through the lens of the pattern. Each opinion gets scrutinized for evidence of the same biases. Browns fans have already turned on Lloyd. The reaction to his Garrett comments has been overwhelmingly negative. People who used to take his analysis seriously are now dismissing him entirely. His takes are being mocked, shared as examples of bad journalism, and used to discredit everything else he says. That's what happens when you push narratives that defy reality too many times. The sports media world should be paying attention. Lloyd's credibility crisis is a warning about what happens when the hot take economy goes too far. When journalists prioritize controversy over accuracy, when they target athletes unfairly to generate engagement, when they exhibit patterns that raise concerns about bias, the consequences eventually catch up with them. Credibility, once lost, is almost impossible to regain. Every future Lloyd take will be viewed skeptically. Every opinion he offers will be scrutinized for evidence of the same problems. He's put himself in a position where even reasonable analysis will be dismissed because of the unreasonable takes that preceded it. And honestly, that's how it should be. Journalists should face consequences when they consistently push narratives that don't hold up. There should be accountability in sports media. The hot take economy has created an environment where too many journalists feel they can say whatever generates attention without facing any real pushback. Lloyd's credibility crisis is a corrective to that. The athletes who have been targeted deserve better. Myles Garrett has done everything right and been subjected to takes that seem designed to tear him down rather than accurately assess his performance. Shedeur Sanders has been criticized in ways that don't match how other prospects are covered. These athletes have reputations that can be affected by the narratives built around them. Sports journalists have real power. They shape how players are perceived. They influence contract negotiations, legacy discussions, Hall of Fame considerations. With that power comes responsibility. The responsibility to be fair. The responsibility to be accurate. The responsibility to examine your own biases and ensure they're not affecting your coverage. Jason Lloyd has failed to meet that responsibility. His takes on Myles Garrett represent a failure of everything sports journalism should be about, and his credibility is paying the price. The question now is whether Lloyd will reflect on any of this, whether he'll examine the pattern of his coverage and consider whether the criticism has merit, whether he'll acknowledge that his takes on Garrett were wrong and that his treatment of certain players has raised legitimate concerns, or whether he'll double down, continue pushing the same narratives, and watch his credibility continue to erode. If past behavior is any indication, doubling down seems more likely. That's the nature of the hot take economy. Admitting you were wrong doesn't generate engagement the way standing by controversial takes does. But every time Lloyd defends the indefensible, the damage to his credibility grows. And eventually, he'll be left with nothing but a platform that nobody takes seriously. Let's set aside the controversy for a moment and talk about what actually matters: the future of Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns. Because despite everything Jason Lloyd has said, Garrett isn't going anywhere. The organization knows exactly what they have, and they're not stupid enough to let it go. Myles Garrett is entering what should be the prime years of his career. He's 28 years old, which for an edge rusher means he has several elite seasons left ahead of him. The physical tools are still there. The technique keeps getting better. His understanding of the game deepens with each passing year. Everything points to continued dominance. The Browns front office understands this. There has been no indication from anyone with actual decision-making power that trading Garrett is even a consideration. The comments have come from a journalist, not from anyone inside the organization. And the organization's actions speak louder than any hot take. They've invested in Garrett. They've built around him. They know he's the cornerstone of their defense. What the Browns need to do is surround Garrett with more talent. The struggles this season weren't his fault. The offense couldn't score. The other pieces on defense weren't good enough. The coaching was inconsistent. Garrett did everything he could, dominated at a historic level, but one player can only do so much. The solution isn't to get rid of your best player. It's to add more good players around him. The front office is hopefully learning from this season. They've seen what Garrett can do when he's at his best. They've also seen what happens when the rest of the team doesn't hold up their end. The path forward is clear. Improve the quarterback situation. Add pieces on defense. Build a team that can complement what Garrett brings to the table every week. For Garrett personally, the future looks incredibly bright. He's already got a resume that puts him among the best edge rushers of his generation. A few more seasons at this level, and he's a lock for the Hall of Fame. His 7-sack game will be remembered for decades. His consistency will be cited as an example of how elite players perform. His legacy is already secure, and it's only going to grow. The fans know this. That's why the reaction to Lloyd's takes has been so intense. Browns fans have watched Garrett carry this team on his back year after year. They've seen him be the one reliable thing on a roster that's often been unreliable. They understand what it means to have a player of his caliber, and they're not going to tolerate some journalist trying to push him out the door. The future of the Cleveland Browns is tied to Myles Garrett. Not in the sense that he's the only piece that matters, but in the sense that you build championship teams around players like him. You don't trade them. You don't question their heart or their ability to perform when it matters. You recognize what you have and you do everything possible to maximize it. Lloyd's takes will be forgotten. That's the reality of sports media. Hot takes come and go. The ones that age well get remembered. The ones that look foolish fade into obscurity. The take that the Browns should trade Myles Garrett is going to age very, very poorly. And in a few years, it'll be cited as an example of someone who completely missed the mark. Meanwhile, Garrett will keep doing what he does. He'll keep terrorizing quarterbacks. He'll keep making plays that change games. He'll keep showing up every week and proving why he's one of the best to ever do it. That's what generational talents do. They perform regardless of the noise around them. The Browns' window for success depends on how well they build around Garrett during his remaining prime years. They have a chance to do something special if they make the right moves. Garrett has given them a foundation. The question is whether the organization can add the pieces needed to compete for championships. That's what this should be about. Building a winner in Cleveland. Using the franchise cornerstone as the foundation. Making smart moves that complement what Garrett brings. Instead, we're spending time discussing bad takes from a journalist who seems more interested in controversy than in actually helping the franchise he covers. The future is bright for Myles Garrett. It's bright for the Browns if they make the right decisions. And the hot takes that suggested otherwise will be remembered only as examples of how wrong sports media can get it. At the end of the day, this story is about more than just one journalist and one player. It's about accountability in sports media. It's about how athletes are treated. It's about patterns that deserve examination and questions that need to be asked. Myles Garrett delivered one of the greatest defensive seasons in NFL history. He showed up every week and dominated. He led the league in sacks and put up numbers that will be remembered for decades. And in return, he was targeted by takes that defied all logic and reason. The questions about Jason Lloyd's motivations will continue. The pattern of his coverage has been noticed. Fans are paying attention, and until there are satisfactory answers, the scrutiny will remain. What's clear is that Myles Garrett is exactly the kind of player the Cleveland Browns should be building around. His future is bright. His legacy is secure. And no amount of bad takes is going to change what he's accomplished on the field. The sports media world needs more accountability, more fairness, and less agenda-driven coverage. Cases like this one are opportunities for reflection and improvement. The question is whether that opportunity will be taken.